This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not an offer or solicitation of any offer to buy or sell securities. SNN.Network and Maj Soueidan are not licensed brokers, broker-dealers, market makers, investment bankers, investment advisors, analysts, or underwriters. We do not recommend any companies discussed. We may buy and sell securities in any company mentioned and may profit in the event those securities rise in value. We recommend you consult with a professional investment advisor, broker, or legal counsel before purchasing or selling any securities referenced in this podcast. Welcome back, everybody, to Avoiding the Crowd podcast with your host, Maj Soueidan. I'm your producer, Robert Kraft from SNN.Network, and we're really excited to have you here listening to, I think we're on episode 5. So, Maj, how you doing, man? Everything good?
Yeah, I'm great, man. How are you doing? How was your weekend?
You know, my weekend, it was a daddy-daughter weekend. So it was a lot of just me and my little girl just chilling. There was a lot of sports on, so I had to eat every screen. You know, I faced away from her, but I had every screen. We went to the beach for like a little walk. Forgot the right sunscreen, so it was a fast walk. And you know, it was nice. I loved it. You know, what about you? I mean, I think you told me offline you just mastered a new Hendrix lick. Is that what's going on?
Well, yeah. Wouldn't say I mastered anything, but I spent all weekend trying to play a lick.
Oh, there you go.
Frustrating weekend. But,
I mean, if you're gonna do that to yourself to try and master any kind of Hendrix, guitar riff, like that's,
yeah.
you're just asking for a very frustrating couple days.
I'm optimistic though that I'll get better.
Well, that's good. That's good, man. Well, look, if everybody see my theme in the back, I got Northern Lights going. I mean, I figured it was my signal of summer starting to come to an end. And also, it's kind of cool with the green and everything. We got action, we got movement, But anyways, if this is your first time listening in, thank you for joining us. You can follow the podcast and get every new episode, really anywhere you can get podcasts. But if you want to look specifically, go to the website, which is avoidingthecrowd.podbean.com. That's where the full stream is. You can also see the video version of this. If you're not watching this, you're just listening in at youtube.com/SNNWire. And you can now find this on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple. So please go and rate and review this so we can continue to spread the message that we're sending here, is hoping people can go and look at more quality due diligence and research covering the microcap space. So enough of my spiel. Let's get to our host and our main theme today. And as you know, that most of these episodes are inspired by Maj's weekly wrap-up from geoinvesting.com. And this week's wrap-up is titled COVID-19 themed stock plays are about to get tricky. Now we're about to go into the fall. We got Halloween relatively coming up in 2 months. So I think you should have saved this for October 30th, but that's okay. We're dealing with this now. So Maj, with that, why is it about to get tricky?
Well, look, I could be wrong too, by the way. So I'm not even it was just a catchy title to use.
It's a good. It's a good title. It works.
Look, I mean, I think when there was a panel that I was on with you maybe a few months ago. I think it was Connor Haley, Jason Hirschman, and Sam Namari. And
yes.
So it was, right. I think it was around March or April. So COVID was really center stage there. It was now, right?
It was you, Connor Haley, Jason Hirschman, and Sam Namiri.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think you'd asked the question, how do you invest through this crisis? And Connor made a pretty good point, I thought, where he said, look, he's not looking to really invest in COVID-19 companies. He's aware of it, but really just basically evaluate companies as usual and business as usual. And I don't think he was investing in COVID-19 type of companies, and that's not what he's all about, really. And I really thought that was interesting and a cool way of looking at it. And I thought, well, what if I did want to invest in them? What if I wanted to invest in COVID-19 companies, or wanted to look at COVID-19 as a theme to invest in? How would I do it? And First of all, I'm not doing that, really in any big way, and haven't done that. All I take is nip some buds here, some interesting plays. But I kind of think, how can we look at this? And I figured a few ways you could look at this if you're an investor, want to invest in the COVID-19 type of theme. And you could look at companies that are about to experience an acceleration in growth in the short run. This is all of a sudden they have some interesting product like gloves maybe, or masks. And you can look at companies that are going to experience an acceleration in their long-term growth trends because of what they already do. Home healthcare, for example. And you can look at companies that maybe that have been unfairly punished, that have been negatively impacted by COVID-19, and eventually will come out of it okay. And so that's kind of the buckets I would put those in. And so some of the bigger gains, at least in the short run, have been companies that directly benefited from, or I hate the word benefited, but their businesses have definitely seen an uptick because they've made ventilators, for example, and the PPE, other PPE stuff. And the trick is to figure out how long, which of those trends are going to stick long term. Which ones are going to dissipate over time. Maybe some stay around for many years. When does that peak occur? If we're living in a new world, how far we come off that peak, and what does a normal run rate look like in revenue for some of those companies in those areas? That's a challenge, and that's kind of why I stay away from it, because it is a challenge. How do you predict that, right? So what could be dangerous for investors that aren't doing deep dive into some of these companies to understand them is getting stuck in a company that's going to peak and come off its peak sharply when COVID-19 play is over or whatever. And but I've spoken to some investors who understand it tremendously. They understand the space very well, and they're investing in companies that they believe are going to benefit for many, many years from revenue and cash flow generation from this whole thing. So, but as an investor, though, you want to be in that position. You don't want to go into this not knowing how the company you're investing in is going to be, if it's a COVID-19 play, how it's going to be able to evolve over time through this whole thing. So that's really important. So I'm not saying don't invest in them. I would never give any advice anyway, but I think it can be. You can get caught up in some of these moves that some of these stocks are making, and all of a sudden you have a portfolio that's COVID-19 portfolio, and most of them revert to the mean over time, and then what happens? So at least just be an informed investor like you would in any other investment you would make. Know what you're investing in, understand all the currents. But the ones and when you're looking at that kind of company too. Some of these companies got unusual benefits from COVID-19. You might want to also ask yourself, okay, well, is there other stuff going on in the background that's also growing, not COVID-19 related? And that way, when COVID-19 revenue does dissipate over time, they have, there you go, it disappeared. they have other things going for them. I'm sorry, if you're not watching Bobby, his head disappeared for a second. I don't know what happened to him. Lost his head. Proudly cleaning out his COVID-19 portfolio as we're speaking. so where I like to be is maybe looking at companies, two areas. So if I am going to play the COVID-19 theme at all, it's going to be in companies that are going to benefit, I think, because of their growth plans, just going to get a lift from the overall COVID-19 theme. Like I said earlier, home health care. Some medical device companies I own in that arena have done well. The cloud communication space, UCaaS space, there's companies I've owned in that space where that growth, which is remote communication, cloud communication, remote conferencing. That's only going to get become a stronger trend over time. It was already a strong trend. So that's an example of areas I'm looking at. So now. I also want to look at a bucket which I mentioned earlier, the unfairly punished bucket. Restaurant companies, stocks that had a good management team in place, that have prepared for mobile ordering already. They could get a lot of the revenue from drive-through, if some of those stocks got punished, I'm looking at those to maybe add aggressively here soon. That maybe have fallen 50, 60% and should see a pretty big increase in revenue once we come out of COVID. Actually, some of them I looked at are actually doing really well now, but the stock prices are still depressed. There's an example. Maybe another area actually is medical device companies where their device served a lot of elective surgeries. So during COVID-19, there were a lot of elective type of surgeries that were put on hold. So some of those companies saw a big drop down on revenue during the times. But eventually, those surgeries are going to come back, and there's still a few companies selling at really depressed prices compared to where we prefer, that had high hopes and high growth prospects that should do well once elective surgeries come back in a bigger way again. I look for companies that reinvent themselves. So if you're investing in good management, they just seem to be able to reinvent themselves. For example, there was one company I invested in that all of a sudden started their metal fabrication business. They started pivoting it a little bit towards helping them make hospital beds in the meantime. So they were, just looking for nimble management teams that are able to not make it the core of their business, but able to take idle capacity in their maybe in their plant and turn it into something in the meantime while they're waiting for the other business to come back. So that was interesting. So that's kind of some stuff, how I kind of looked at the process a little bit. And I just don't want to be stuck in a pure COVID-19 play where I don't understand what's going on. And then all of a sudden I'm stuck with all these shares as they're falling hard, and I've missed the peak. So I just stay away from that. I'm not going to understand it fully, so I stay away from it. But I have talked to some investors that do, like I said earlier, that do know the space well. So if anybody wants to know who that might be or wants some references, just let me know. Email me at maj@geoinvesting.com, and I can probably hook you up with some investors who know the space, the COVID-19 kind of play really well.
So Maj, one question I wanted to follow up here real quick from the wrap up that you did is you said, basically we're trying to figure out what type of habits will stick around and which ones will fade back to normality. That's why when it comes to COVID-19, we're more interested in looking at companies that will experience an acceleration in long-term growth due to long-lasting implications of the pandemic and are not impacted by COVID-19, or stocks that have fallen due to what we believe are temporary negative business impacts from COVID-19. So, with all that in mind, especially when this all first broke out, what, as an investor, what did you do? Do you just sit down and all right, I'm gonna have a cup of coffee and I'm just going to start thinking about these things, and see where my mind goes and see maybe what themes make the most sense. Where, for those who are listening in that are just okay, this is such a huge undertaking potentially, how do you get your start really thinking about these things or thinking about various industries that could be affected or in the long term actually be strong?
Yeah, you don't know this is going to happen when it happens, right? So you have to be prepared for it. You couldn't be prepared for it. So the first thing I really wanted to do was understand how COVID-19 might affect the companies that I do own. And that, so the buckets were negatively, potentially positive momentum in the business or no effect. And then from there, kind of, okay, what does my portfolio look like now? How heavy am I against, is my portfolio when these companies are going to get negatively impacted by COVID-19? And that was really the most important bucket really for me to analyze, because I'm like, okay, if I'm looking at those companies, do I want to keep holding them through this pandemic? Do I want to add to them if they go down? Do I have confidence? So that's how I kind of looked. I didn't look at it in terms of taking advantage of COVID-19. I never looked at it that way. Kind of what Connor Haley had said too. But I did try to see the portfolio I already have. How does it look? How do I make it better? How do I take advantage of the situation and deploy capital in the right way? So when my strategy going in was, okay, here's the stocks that are probably going to get affected negatively. I'm probably going to keep 90% of them. When I went through the whole list, I was confident with the management teams. They had good balance sheets, and I felt they're going to come out of this. So the thing was, when do I want to start deploying capital to them was the next question, right? And I really didn't start doing that until recently, actually, because a lot of them still stayed down. They've proven they can weather Q1 and Q2. Actually Q2 was probably going to be the low point for revenue for a lot of companies. It's never as bad as you think it's going to get, and that's what you learn. I've invested, through a lot of market turmoil, and usually the scenario in our head is worse than it is in reality. So that was the first thing I did. Those negative performing companies that had real direct exposure, negative exposure to COVID-19. Do I want to keep them? And if I do want to keep them, as I go down maybe 50% or so, what do I want to add to them? That's how I went through that thought process there. And then I was looking, okay, well, here's the companies that I think they're going to see acceleration in their growth. I hope they pull back so I can add to them, right away. And that's kind of what I did early on. There was several companies that had fallen that were going to have no effect by COVID-19 in their business, and we're going to see acceleration in growth. And so I went there to add those. And only after I did that did I really start looking for other stocks to maybe add to my portfolio around those two themes still. So I would go and look at, okay, which of these stocks I'm looking at now that maybe were on my list that I don't own yet are in that negative bucket that I might want to start buying soon. And which of these stocks I've actually was able to buy in the last 2 years because they got away from me, that maybe have come down with their growth rates are better now than they were before. And that's how I kind of went through it. And then of course around that I would, you get caught up in some trade in some of these stocks, but some short-term COVID-19 companies here and there, but didn't make it the core of my portfolio. Like there are some companies that are seeing a potentially their growth is being revived from what's going on here. When the new world we'll be living in, new industries will be born, new opportunities will be born to invest in. So I'm looking at some of those too. Like what will be around for the long term because of COVID-19?
So
okay.
So then let's go back to the original question for this week's episode, about, is it about to get tricky? Is it maybe still too soon to even ask that question because it's still so unclear when, a vaccine will be ready or, a treatment, like a real, worldwide, globally accepted treatment. So is it too early to think that it's about to get tricky, or, should we start thinking about it now that it could get tricky? I don't know.
The fact
Do you even have an answer?
The fact that you're asking the question means it's tricky. So it's like, so I guess what I'm really trying to get at is I don't want to put myself in that position to know that, right? It is tricky for me I don't know the answers. And like I said, there are some people I'm talking to that really did deep dive into some companies that do have some answers on some of these companies that I do want to mention symbols today. But I don't know. I don't think it's ever too early to start asking these kind of questions because, at some point it's going to be a reality. But it's possible I'm totally wrong. It's possible that this is not a question to ask maybe until 18 months from now. Who knows? 2 years from now, maybe it isn't difficult. We won't know. We won't know until the vaccine comes out, how well it works. There may be a change in long-term attitude where people are going to be wearing masks for many years to come. Maybe masks are worn by service providers, in restaurants still, but maybe the patrons don't wear them anymore. There's just a lot of things to discuss. But here, it's plausible to believe that lots of the stuff, like the PPE stuff, is going to be around. It's definitely going to be at an elevated level more than it was before the pandemic for some time. The question is, and if it brings a lot of cash flow for companies while they can grow other parts of their business, and it would be very interesting. I'm sure for sure. Yeah.
I think maybe the way to wrap this up is that, is there ever a time in investing where it's not tricky? And that's the fun of it. Whether it's a COVID theme or GFC or Brexit or any of these big macro black swan and non-black swan events or potential black swan events or really good events. At the end of the day, that's why you listen to podcasts like this and other sorts of podcasts, just to, hopefully not as tricky. But guess what? we're just as confused as everybody else.
Well, I think the thing is that you make it
To a
less
degree.
tricky. You can make it less tricky by not caring about that stuff, though. So by not consuming yourself with COVID-19 stocks and stuff, just invest the old-fashioned way and invest in good companies and great management teams that tend to kind of hopefully grow through this stuff. So again, you can invest in reaction to a crisis, or you can invest through crises, right? So the best way to do that is just find great companies. And what's pretty amazing, what you'll find out if you start doing that and you have diversified portfolios of great companies and great management teams, they tend to be able to weather these storms. And that's what you learn. And don't focus so much on the theme. Focus a lot on the company, and you're confident that it can get through different themes as we move along. And that's why I kind of like some diversification to some degree. I know there's the battle between, we talked about before, between diversification and concentration. The cowboy ego, they want all concentration, 1-2 stocks, I'm going to bet it, I'm going to bet it out of the park. But then, what if it's all invested in areas where that's going to get just destroyed, right? Like what happened with COVID-19. Potentially, maybe you had the worst stocks you could have had. So if you have a diversified portfolio of great companies and great management teams, it might make it easier for you to weather that type of storm and be in a better probability for it to succeed. So
for sure.
I just want to throw that out there.
No, that was a good pitch. That was a good pitch to throw. I think we all are taking a look at that one. That's for sure. All right, Maj. Well, I think that's a good way to wrap up for this episode. Where can people go and follow more information about you and subscribe to your newsletter and everything you got going on at GeoInvesting?
So geoinvesting.com is our website, and we have a 7-day free trial if you want to check it out. We have annual, biannual, and monthly subscription offers. We publish research every day. We publish our weekly wrap-up research email that goes every Sunday. We develop model portfolios based on the different themes we're following at GeoInvesting for our members to take a look at. You can email me directly at maj@geoinvesting.com. Follow me on Twitter at maj_geoinvesting, or you can follow GeoInvesting directly at Twitter at GeoInvesting.
Awesome. Well, Maj, always a pleasure. And have a great Labor Day weekend.
You too, man.
All right. Later.
Hit those drums.
Yeah, I wish. Later. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not an offer or solicitation of any offer to buy or sell securities. SNN.Network and Maj Soueidan are not licensed brokers, broker-dealers, market makers, investment bankers, investment advisors, analysts, or underwriters. We do not recommend any companies discussed. We may buy and sell securities in any company mentioned and may profit in the event those securities rise in value. We recommend you consult with a professional investment advisor, broker, or legal counsel before purchasing or selling any securities referenced in this podcast.